everyone. I'm Nancy Dunham. I'm the principal analyst for Ward's Auto. Thank you for joining us today for another Ward's Auto Fast Chat. Today, we're going to talk about EVs and what to expect as they continue to populate the marketplace. And joining me today is Tom Condrad. He's the global lead advanced analytics of urban science. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you for taking time to chat with us today. I was going to talk a little bit about urban science and so forth, but I thought it would be better if you did. Tell us a little about urban science and so forth.
Sounds good. So urban science was founded in 1977 by Jim Anderson, who is still the CEO and president. And we are the global automotive retail experts. And what that means is that we build software, do consulting for the auto industry as it relates to retail.
I was looking at your title, to Global Lead of Advanced Analytics. Tell us a little bit about what that means. What do you do there every day?
So my job is mainly to predict the future, which sounds exciting. And it is, and it's something that I love to do.
Can you predict the lottery? No lottery, okay.
Not the lottery, not the stock market, although there are
all right, unfortunate,
other people
but I had to ask. Yes, I had to ask.
Yes, yeah, that is my first question. I get that a lot. But we do predict automotive sales and consumer behavior and forecast the auto industry.
Now, tell us a little bit about urban science role as far as electric vehicles are concerned. I mean, it's no surprise to anyone listening or you certainly that, as they get into the marketplace, there's more and more chatter about them. So tell us what your role is, or what urban science's role is, more correctly, with the electric vehicles.
Absolutely. So it is the hottest topic in the industry. Right now, it's everybody wants to know, as these manufacturers are investing billions of dollars. The Wall Street Journal reports it as the largest automotive manufacturing boom in decades. So the OEMs are investing in it, and the question is, how will this roll out geographically, across the country? So our specialty is in that automotive retail space, is that location type analysis. And so we're helping OEMs and dealer groups and dealers even, understand what the opportunity is. What's the opportunity for EVs in their markets this year? And so that's really something that's been very in demand as a question to lots of folks.
Broadly speaking, what's your outlook on EV sales going forward?
So for this year, we're forecasting that the U.S. market will surpass 1 million battery electric vehicle sales this year.
Okay.
That's up over 50% from last year. And we're most likely to surpass this month, actually. So it's kind of breaking news.
Yeah, it is breaking news. That's big.
Yeah. And in terms of the long-term forecast, we generally take, the consensus, right? So a lot of think tanks in Washington and, across the country, looking at the long-term, aspects of that. And so, our view is similar to that. It's 2 million battery electrics by 2025, 6 million by 2030. And so, that would basically be, double next by 2025, it would be double what we're at this year. So that's pretty aggressive growth, but those are our baseline forecasts for the industry, and they're generally in line with, what the consensus is.
Now, I know about urban science, but probably some of our viewers are not as familiar, our listeners. Can you tell me a little bit about, I get reports every day, with statistics, with predictions, with forecasts. Can you tell me a little bit about how you ensure it's accurate and what your accuracy rate is for these things?
So one of the accuracy success stories that we had this year was forecasting that San Francisco DMA would exceed 50% penetration in sales for all types of EVs. So high electrics, battery electrics. We forecasted slightly over 50%, and they've been surpassing that this year. So San Francisco's ahead of the curve, as they say, and but we feel like we nailed that one. And then overall, broadly speaking, this year we're at 98% share, forecasting. So looking at all the DMAs,
Wow.
so definitely an actionable, usable number for planning purposes.
Fascinating. Congratulations to you. Tell me a little bit. You mentioned San Francisco. I'm in Tucson. I mentioned DC, where I used to live.
Mhm.
Michigan, I'm sure, is a completely different story. Tell us a little bit about your views on the geographic trends, if you will, with the EVs.
Absolutely. So California definitely leads the market. Right now they're over 30% of all EV sales across the country. It's a large state in terms of population, but definitely the biggest state. Now, what we're seeing is very interesting. We're seeing hotspots of electric sales pop up: Seattle, Portland, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Denver, these places. And Tucson is coming in, a little behind, say, Maricopa County, but not far behind. And,
Okay.
I, there's definitely a lot of, northern snowbirds that like to vacation down there, with a lot of wealth, above average incomes. And
Absolutely.
yeah. So, that is who really are the early adopters. It's the people that, have more, wherewithal to, deal with all of the inconveniences of adopting a new technology. They have probably multiple cars in their garage. They tend to have that. So yeah, we see a lot of that in Tucson, in your area. Not leading the edge, but they're definitely not far behind the hotspots.
Are there other areas that are hotspots, if you will, besides, we all know about San Francisco, Washington State, and so forth. Are there other ones that you're seeing that might surprise some of our viewers or our listeners?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Forsyth County in Georgia, it's a northeast suburb of Atlanta. They're over 20% EV shares.
Wow, really? That's
Yes,
fascinating.
yeah. They are also Loudoun County in Virginia, over 20% this year, right?
Outside
Loudoun,
DC
sorry.
Metro, just outside of DC Metro. So good money there, I know.
Yeah,
Yes.
in fact, they are the highest median income in the whole country in terms of counties. So not surprising that they are adopting EVs.
True.
Yeah, other places that are popping up though are even places in Texas, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, Collin County, which is kind of the Plano metro area. It's northeast
Okay.
of that kind of four county cluster. That's the Dallas Plano area. They're not at 20% yet, but they're up there in the teens in terms of BEV share. So these are the things that we're seeing. Actually, places outside of California, outside of the West Coast, they are emerging as electric vehicle adopters.
And of course, Elon Musk has moved his headquarters, I believe, to Austin. So yeah, I had lived there for a short while as well, and I saw just a proliferation of those as they went along. I'm curious about other technology spots, if you will. For example, Raleigh Durham. Are you seeing anything there?
Oh yeah, the technology triangle, I think,
Yes,
is
yes.
yes. Yeah, Raleigh Durham's over 15%. They've increased a lot this year. I mean, really, these white collar, higher income, higher education counties across the southern and eastern parts of the U.S. really increased adoption by 50, 60% this year. And so, that's the trend. That's where we're seeing it, is that
Okay.
it's not broadly in all these counties across the country, not quite yet, but in these places that we call the early adopter counties, really a lot of growth this year. And we expect that to kind of radiate out from there, right? As people see these vehicles around, people that they work with, people in their social circles, they expose, the early adopters expose to the kind of middle majority, if you will. That's how EV adoption will continue to progress across the country, just through experience of people that you know.
It's funny. I spoke to a very well-known dealer outside of New York City, just outside of New York City. And he was saying to me, I would love to sell more EVs. It's just difficult because of the housing there. No one can run an extension cord up 20 stories. Can you tell us just a little bit, obviously not on his experience because you don't know him, but anything in the more, the denser Boston, Chicago, New York, some of those denser areas where there is what do you call it, multi-level dwellings?
Yeah, multi-unit dwellings.
Multi-unit, thank you.
Yes. So that is a challenge. That's a huge challenge. There was recently a comprehensive survey done in California. I think California Energy Commission, I believe, but I have to double check that. But there's a major study in California that was done, and they said probably 35% of multi-unit dwellers will never have access to charging. I mean, it'll just be too hard. So that is a major concern as we forecast this out, farther years into the future. And we look at different simulations that we run, how many people can adopt even in California. And, we see some major roadblocks with that. And so part of that, challenge is, how does charging station become convenient, right? How do we put more charging stations out there? Or, what does the world look like with, multi-unit dwellers adopting EVs? I think we have a major convenience concern for those kinds of folks that, they might have the financial wherewithal personally. They might live upscale places, but it's just, will it ever be convenient? These are questions that we have.
Of course. And I know the grid plays into it as well. Tell us, we talked about the urban and so forth. Tell us a little about those folks out in Wyoming, Montana, the rural areas, Indiana, Idaho. Tell us a little about that. Do you see, I don't know if it's fair for me to ask, but do you see an interest out there, or do you see any chance that adoption will rise there?
So a lot of the scientific research on adoption points out that adoption of any technology, whether it's cell phones or VCRs or anything, is largely a social process. And what I mean by that, it's the social interaction, the social groups, the people that you hang out with, after work. That really influences to a large degree. And so, in those rural areas, that's going to take time. That's going to take time for new technologies, whether it's EVs or hybrids, to just kind of become normal, not stand out, right? I mean, who wants to really stand out among their peers if something's perceived to be questionable? Sure. You don't understand it, right? So, and that's really very common in the social sciences as they study adoption. So it'll be a challenge. It'll be a challenge for rural adoption. But the reality is that in time, as more people become comfortable with it, there's a very good chance that, hybrid technologies, actually, we didn't talk about that yet, really.
True.
But when we talk about rural, northern, more industrial places, hybrids are a really good middle ground for a lot of people, where they don't really stand out as being something that unusual, but it's kind of a middle ground of adoption where they still have a gas engine. They're still familiar with that.
Yes.
But it's probably most likely, my view, and it's certainly when we look at the data and the simulations, the rural Indianas and the rural Wyomings, they're much more likely to adopt the hybrid technology than the pure battery electric, at least, for the medium term.
Which we know, I mean, that's one thing Toyota said for a long time. And they did get some blowback on that they were keeping ICE, they were keeping hybrid, they were keeping EV, something for everybody, if you will. So I think that's a great point. I started this out by saying, it's unfair, especially now, to look at everything broadly, but I'm going to ask you to look at something broadly again. And again, I think everyone would realize urban versus rural versus everything. But, in your mind, what are some of the overall greatest roadblocks to EV adoption?
I think some of the biggest roadblocks is charging stations, just that convenience factor, right? That's a concern. The other thing that's kind of a roadblock really is awareness, is just, getting people aware, familiar with it, getting them exposed to it. That takes time. And I don't think other than complete government regulation, which, there's a scale and there's a timeline for that.
Right.
But outside of that, those things take time, and it's just a social process. And then I think the third thing is the expense, right? I think generally speaking, we'll call them the more traditional manufacturers, outside of these new battery electrics, Tesla, Rivian, and those, they're learning how to make EVs, inexpensively, right? I think Ford came out and recently said the second generation of their EVs are going to be engineered from the ground up, all around electric technology, right? And so that's going to take time, but the promise of EVs is a simpler manufacturing process. And so as scale, as scalability, increases with, the supply chains, people will find ways to make them more efficient, make them cheaper, make them more for the mass market. That always happens with technology. The exact timeline, it's hard to predict.
Sure.
But we definitely see signs of that happening.
Tom, I know you have no time at all in your crazy job at your crazy and impressive job at Urban Science. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us today and share your expertise with us. And I am going to wrap up now, but I want to thank everyone for joining us on this Ward's Auto Fast Chat. I'm Nancy Dunham, the Principal Analyst for Retail at Ward's, and Tom Condrat is from Urban Science and gave us just incredible insights into what he sees as far as EVs moving ahead. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Nancy.